Donald Trump slamming Chris Christie along with the publisher of New Hampshire's largest newspaper. This comes after the union leader printed a withering front-page editorial describing the Republican frontrunner as a crude blowhard and called his campaign an insult to Republican voters. Trump will firing back, calling the publisher, Joe McQuaid, Christie's lapdog and blasting Governor Christie for the so-called Bridgegate scandal. Listen to this.
Put yourself in a common sense mode. You are with your cabinet, you're with them all the time. They're closing the biggest bridge in the United States, most traveled on bridge, one of them in the world, and most traveled on in the United States. You're doing that, and you're not telling the governor, and you're with him all the time. You're not saying, Governor, by the way, sir, we're closing the George Washington Bridge tonight. No, you're having lunch and you don't happen to bring it up. Does anybody believe that, honestly?
Mary Katharine Ham is editor-at-large for HotAir.com and a Fox News contributor. Mary Katharine, great to see you. So what's this all about, going after Chris Christie?
Well, I think, first of all, it may be about a little mini-surge that Chris Christie is having in polls in New Hampshire, which puts him about third in the race right now and plausibly within striking distance of one or two. Trump, of course, responds to that kind of thing. We all know he watches the polls very closely, and so he's hearkening back to Bridgegate to take him down a peg.
Well, and he also talked about his sort of embrace of sorts of President Obama right after Superstorm Sandy when President Obama visited New Jersey. Let's take a look at some of those polls right there, which has Trump at 25 in the state of New Hampshire, Rubio at 12, Christie and Cruz tied at 11. So is Chris Christie Trump's biggest threat right now in the state of New Hampshire?
I don't know that he's the biggest threat in New Hampshire, but he's certainly a plausible threat. And by the way, I would like to hearken back to a time where the conventional wisdom, which I disagreed with at the time, was that Chris Christie had too much of the New Jersey tough guy and bully act going on to woo GOP voters. And now Donald Trump is #1 in the polls. So I think that one has been undermined just a bit.
Who would have thunk that he could have out Chris Christie?
Yes, and perhaps it'll be a good match when we see them go up against each other if it gets really close here.
Well, you know, one interesting thing about Christie's campaign up there is he spent not only a ton of time up there, as have a lot of the candidates, but he's been going out speaking about a lot of the local issues in depth. Heroin, for example, and the epidemic there in the state of New Hampshire. Donald Trump has touched on that, but not really gone in depth. Is that what's in part fueling this Christie surge, if you will? He's increased in the polls quite a bit since the month of November.
Well, I do think both New Hampshire and Iowa voters respond to having people on the ground. They respond to people who know their issues. Chris Christie being nearby, of course, knows some of their issues. Donald Trump makes a point sometimes of not knowing the intimate details of issues and sort of being proud of that fact. So I think Christie is probably countering him in that manner. So I think that's part of what's going on here for sure.
All right, let's take a look at this union leader op-ed on the front page of that newspaper saying, quote, the crowds, the media coverage, and the polls have led him and some pundits to believe that he will win the 2016 Republican presidential nomination. That is an insult to the intelligence of Republican voters. He reminds us of the grown-up bully Biff in the Back to the Future movie series. Really? Are we supposed to take that seriously?
Well, yeah, I think when you're doing a front-page editorial in a newspaper, maybe you want to keep the language pretty mature, and that is a bit of a Trumpian insult deployed, and perhaps that's why it was deployed, because Trump traffics in those kind of insults a lot. You know, Biff does share some characteristics. That's why they based the character on him in the second version of the movie. But and I think, by the way, Trump never shy about being compared to pop culture figures and famous people. So I don't
Mary
think...
Katharine, I should just point out, because we have a picture of him on the screen, the guy from the movie. We're not showing that. We're not making that comparison, but rather the union leader is.
The union leader
and
did,
that just shows what this whole campaign, I guess, is devolved to. But who knows if Donald Trump coming out and attacking that newspaper will have any kind of negative impact, the hometown paper. All right. Mary Katharine Ham, thank you so much, and always great to see you.
You too.